What's up, guys? It is Sam here, and I wanted to talk about the three factors or buckets that all property distress falls into. So, before we get into those three factors, I wanted to tell you to subscribe and press that bell notification so YouTube can notify you every time I post a new video. Say that 5 times fast. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about what those three buckets are. And then we're going to talk about what kind of thing might cause some of these things. And also the once you understand the source, then you can get a better idea of how to potentially approach that or the risks involved. So those three factors are personal, property, and market. So let's start with personal. Personal distress, right? Like somebody has a medical condition, they went through a divorce, somebody's death, there was a death in the family, or just you making poor financial decisions. Everybody has their own story on how things come about or why there is distress in their life. And this causes that distress to, if there's a property owner, right, and they're not, for whatever reason, they came upon a financial hardship and they're not able to pay their bills, this presents opportunity not to take advantage of people, but to help people out, right? Because you can help somebody else out and still create a win-win. From my experience, when you come into a conversation with somebody under these conditions, and whatever they might be, right? This person knows that they haven't made, at least I haven't met one person who thinks that they made the best decisions or are handling some of these things. So every conversation I've had, they are aware that they've made poor financial decisions or, life happens and this is not necessarily going to turn out the ideal way from whatever story they originally told themselves in their head, right? So sometimes there might be a little bit of resentment or whatever the case is, but this has nothing to do with you. They might just be upset because their expectations are this and the reality is this. And first of all, life, side note right here, there's a tangent. That's what creates problems with the people. They have expectations and then they have reality, and they're not the fucking same thing, right? Like, look at that in your own fucking life. Anyway, back to this. So one of the big factors with dealing with property along those lines is that relationship, building that relationship with the person, and understanding that you're coming off as a win-win, right? Like, and everybody has their own way of doing business, and certain people who do this in a way that's not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily operate my business in the same way, but to each their own. I would like to come up with a win-win for this solution. The next bucket is property. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Property distress, right? Like you have old single-pane windows, the roof needs to be replaced, the heating system's fucked up, like very outdated, just no maintenance has been kept up on the property. So that kind of thing is pretty self-explanatory. I'm sure driving around or being around people have seen plenty of distressed properties from that bucket. Now, what might be some things that you would like to consider to better understand that bucket? And that would be the market comps. Like, so if you were looking at a property that is distressed, and like these are not independent, meaning the buckets are not independent. You could have 2 or 3 all together that are all impactful on one individual property, right? You could have somebody who has gone through a medical condition or a divorce or just made poor financial decisions, and they're distressed, right? So they are not able to pay their bills. So they may not keep up on the maintenance on their property. And they could have lost their job, which put them into that financial distress to not be able to take care of the property maintenance on their property because the giant factory in town closed down, which would be market distress. So we're going to get into the market distress in a second here, but understanding the property comps, not just like an ARV, after repair value, but the property comps from the standpoint of like what's suitable, right? Like if you're in a super high-end neighborhood, coming in with the lowest common denominator for materials for a property is not necessarily going to be the best option. Unless it's done super tastefully and very, it could be, but most of the time you're gonna probably put in comparable, something that's like the market's at this level of property and materials and that type of thing. That's styling and windows and all that kind of stuff, and the interior finish of the property is at this level. So if you come in and you're doing stuff that's like a C-level quality, there's going to be a discrepancy in the ARV that you're seeking. So you want to understand what other properties look like in the area so that you know how you have to repair that. Because once you understand the comps in the area, then you can actually go through and try to get a better understanding of the actual repairs needed on that property to be able to make that financial decision, if it makes sense for you, right? And you can check out the channel to see other videos I've made on that. I'm actually trying to work on a couple properties right now. One of them, not sure if it's going to go through. The other one, I'm working with a lawyer, and we'll keep you guys posted. So make sure to subscribe to see that. There's a red button just like this. Just gently tap on that red button so that YouTube can notify you every time I post a video. The last bucket is market distress. And when I alluded to this earlier, what is market distress? Well, if I'm from Rochester, New York, and if you've ever heard of the company called Kodak, they used to make cameras, and our headquarters were in Rochester, New York. And at one point, Rochester, New York is probably like, 150,000 people. Similar to Buffalo or Syracuse or Cleveland, Ohio, or markets in terms of size like that. And the Kodak Corporation employed around 60,000 or 70,000 people. So when you have a company that employs 30 or 40 or close to 50% of the entire population go out of business, that has a substantial market impact. So market impacts are very difficult to actually, that would be like a systematic risk. That's where some of these other ones are idiosyncratic. Idiosyncratic is just mean like, think of it as individual, versus systematic is, think of it as like outside of your control or like the entire fucking system, right? So you can't just open up a new Kodak and employ these 60,000 people. So if you have 60,000 people that are losing their jobs, and it's not necessarily going to be like, okay, 60,000 people, now we're cutting down to 5,000 people and 55,000 people lose their jobs tomorrow. It's like, okay, well, we're going to cut off 20% of the workforce, right? So 15,000 people lose their jobs this year. 16 months later, there's another round of layoffs, and there's another 20,000 people that lose their jobs. And then, a year and a half after that, another 20,000 lose their jobs. So it happens over time, but that puts makes a big ripple in that market. And it's not something that's super controllable unless you have a tremendous amount of money to throw at something like that, and how big the market is. Maybe something in like Rochester, if you wanted to take over the market and you had a substantial amount of money and were open to taking on all that risk, you could potentially buy up the market or whatever the case is and then adjust accordingly. But those are the three factors to take a look at when you're looking at property, or those are just the three factors that go into distressed prices on property. We've got that personal, we've got property, and then we've got market. And these are not all independent, meaning, as I mentioned earlier, you can have overlap on all of these things. So, and I did you guys get the picture here, but you can have overlap on any, if this is personal, this is property, and this is market. You can have overlap where all three of them are overlapping. You can have overlap where it's the property and the person. You can have where it's the market and the person. You can have it where it's the market and the property. So, because you can have a market that's suppressed, meaning prices are depressed or distressed, but not necessarily meaning the property is distressed. Like the windows are fucked up, or the heating or the air conditioning is fucked up. Like, you can have a decent property that's all fixed up and everything, but the whole market is depressed. So that's why you can have overlap in any one of these three things. Anyways, appreciate you guys. Don't forget to press that bell notification. If you guys have any questions about any of this, please let me know. I love this kind of stuff. So let me know down below in the comments. Or if you have a specific property that you are taking a look at and would like my thoughts on it, reach out to me on Instagram or here, and maybe we can have a conversation or whatever. I'm not looking for anything. I just enjoy this kind of stuff. So reach out to me on Instagram. Link is in the description. Peace.